what fun to run and jump and play. Curious George, the curious little monkey. Let's go see what he's doing today.
Curious George wins a contest. George, said the man with the yellow hat, they're having an exhibition at the farm today. Let's go. They got into their little blue car and drove off. At the farm, the children were getting their exhibits ready. George's friend Jimmy was showing his prize puppy. His brother Kevin was showing his pet pig. And Jenny was showing her talking parrot. We're in the corn shucking contest, George, said Jenny. Come on over later. I see a friend of mine over there, George, said the man. I'll be right back. George looked around. A woman was selling cotton candy. She was dipping a paper cone inside a spinning machine. Pink stuff stuck all over the cone. Get your cotton candy here, called a woman. Then she stopped the machine. Oh, dear, I've got to get some more cones, she said. George was watching. How did that machine work? George was curious. He pushed a button, and pink stuff started to spin around. But there were no cones. George needed something else to pick up the stuff. He took a spoon, dipped it in, and a pink ball began to form. It got bigger and bigger. Finally, the stuff spilled all over, covering everything, including George. Who turned on the machine? Cried the woman when she came back with the cone. She was angry. George was scared. Catch him, shouted the woman, and she ran after George. All the people started to laugh at the sight of a pink monkey. George ran through a pig pen, through a field of sheep, leaped over a vegetable stand, and disappeared in a field of corn. On the other side of the field, Jenny and Kevin were sitting in front of a big pile of corn. George, come here quickly, called Kevin. You've got to help us, Jenny said. The contest is starting and we need you for our team. George jumped up on the bench just as the starter's whistle blew. George and his team began to shuck their corn. How good that George was a monkey. He could shuck with all four hands. People cheered when they saw him. Go, George, go! Soon, George's team had finished the whole pile. We've won, shouted Jenny. Hooray for George, shouted Kevin. Congratulations, said the judge. The winners are Jenny, Kevin, and George. Suddenly, George felt a tug. It was the lady with the cotton candy. So there you are, she said angrily. This is the troublemaker who messed up my candy machine. George was scared. What would happen to him? Hold it, said the judge. George shouldn't have done that, but he did help Jenny and Kevin win the contest. Please let him go, said Kevin. Well, all right, she said. Just this time. Everybody clapped and cheered. But if George is so good at shucking, she added, I'm sure he can help me make cotton candy. And that's what George did. The last one in line was the man with the yellow hat. George gave him the biggest cone of all.
One morning, Martha came into Will's bedroom looking very fierce.
Quack, Mom. What's the matter?
What's the matter? It's these holes in your clothes, of course. You've been climbing trees again, haven't you? she said, as she handed him another pair of trousers. "Look, here's a new pair for you to wear. Now you look after them this time, and come and have your breakfast." Will dressed quickly and hurried down to the kitchen. As he was finishing his breakfast, there came a knock on the door, and there were all his friends, and even said,
Is Will coming out to play, please? Gobble, gobble.
"Well, all right," said Martha. "Remember, Will, no climbing trees."
Quack. All right, Mom.
Will replied, and out he went with the others to play football in the big field. It was a great game. The ball flew backwards and forwards, and they were all very amused. When the ball came to Shawnee, however, he gave it such a hard kick that it shot high into the air and landed in the topmost branches of a tall tree.
My ball.
Said Dick sadly.
How will I get it down from there?
Then Will said,
Quack, Dick. Don't worry. I'll go up and get it for you.
Everybody looked at him in surprise.
Gobble, Will, your mother told you not to climb trees, didn't she?
Said Even. Will smiled.
Yes, but she didn't tell me not to fly.
And away he went. It didn't take him long to find the ball between two branches. He picked it up and shouted,
Here it comes!
and threw it down. Then he looked around him. He could see the whole countryside for miles around. But then, the tragedy happened. Will was about to fly down when the branch snapped under his weight, and he slipped down until the stub of the branch tore a huge hole in his trousers. His friends heard a loud quack and saw Will hanging by his trousers, unable to move.
We better get Will's father at once.
Cried Dick. And Shawnee said, I'll go, and ran as fast as he could go to the farm. Humphrey didn't take long to hurry over and look up at Will.
Oh, can you move?
He called.
No, Dad! I'm stuck!
Will answered.
All right,
Said Humphrey.
bye for now.
Quack! What do you mean, bye for now? I can't move!
Exactly.
His father called back.
You just stay there for an hour or two. Maybe you'll learn not to climb trees and tear your clothes then.
And Humphrey started back towards the farmyard, shaking with laughter. Well, of course, when Dick and the others followed him and explained that Will hadn't climbed the tree, but had only flown up in order to get Dick's ball, Humphrey forgave him and fetched a ladder to get him down. When Martha heard about it, she laughed and laughed until her eyes were full of tears. And she forgave Will for tearing his trousers and gave him and his friends a piece of spider cake each. When Will went to bed that night, he thought he had the best father and mother in the world. But he decided not to climb trees ever again.
Good night.
Once upon a time, there were 3 little kittens, and their names were Mittens, Tom Kitten, and Moppet. They had dear little fur coats of their own, and they tumbled about the doorstep and played in the dust. But one day their mother, Mrs. Tabitha Twitchit, expected friends to tea, so she fetched the kittens indoors to wash and dress them before the fine company arrived. First, she scrubbed their faces. This one is Moppet. Then she brushed their fur. This one is Mittens. Then she combed their tails and whiskers. And this is Tom Kitten. Tom was very naughty, and he scratched. Mrs. Tabitha dressed Moppet and Mittens in clean pinafores and tuckers. And then she took all sorts of elegant, uncomfortable clothes out of a chest of drawers in order to dress up her son, Thomas. Tom Kitten was very fat, and he had grown. Several buttons burst off. His mother sewed them on again. When the 3 kittens were ready, Mrs. Tabitha unwisely turned them out into the garden to be out of the way while she made hot buttered toast. Now keep your frocks clean, children. You must walk on your hind legs. Keep away from the dirty ash pit, and from Sally Hennypenny, and from the pigsty and the puddle ducks. Moppet and Mittens walked down the garden path unsteadily. Presently they trod upon their pinafores and fell on their noses. When they stood up, there were several green smears. "Let us climb up the rockery and sit on the garden wall," said Moppet. They turned their pinafores back to front and went up with a skip and a jump. Moppet's white tucker fell down into the road. Tom Kitten was quite unable to jump when walking upon his hind legs in trousers. He came up the rockery by degrees, breaking the ferns and shedding buttons right and left. He was all in pieces when he reached the top of the wall. Moppet and Mittens tried to pull him together. His hat fell off, and the rest of his buttons burst. While they were in difficulties, there was a pit-pat-paddle-pat, and the three Puddle Ducks came along the hard, high road, marching one behind the other and doing the goose step. Pit-pat-paddle-pat, pit-pat-waddle-pat. They stopped and stood in a row and stared up at the kittens. They had very small eyes and looked surprised. Then the two duck birds, Rebecca and Jemima Puddle Duck, picked up the hat and tucker and put them on. Mittens laughed so that she fell off the wall. Moppet and Tom descended after her. The pinafores and all the rest of Tom's clothes came off on the way down. "Come, Mr. Drake Puddle Duck," said Moppet. "Come and help us to dress him. Come and button up Tom." Mr. Drake Puddle Duck advanced in a slow, sideways manner and picked up the various articles. But he put them on himself. They fitted him even worse than Tom Kitten. "It's a very fine morning," said Mr. Drake Puddle Duck. And he and Jemima and Rebecca Puddle Duck set off up the road, keeping step. Pit, pat, paddle, pat, pit, pat, waddle, pat. Then Tabitha Twitchit came down the garden and found her kittens on the wall with no clothes on. She pulled them off the wall and took them back to the house. "My friends will arrive in a minute, and you are not fit to be seen. I am affronted," said Mrs. Tabitha Twitchit. She sent them upstairs, and I am sorry to say she told her friends that they were in bed with the measles, which was not true. Quite the contrary. They were not in bed, not in the least. Somehow, there were very extraordinary noises overhead which disturbed the dignity and repose of the tea party. And I think that someday I shall have to make another, larger book to tell you more about Tom Kitten. As for the Puddle Ducks, they went into a pond. The clothes all came off directly because there were no buttons. And Mr. Drake Puddle Duck and Jemima and Rebecca have been looking for them ever since.
One morning, Paddington was pottering about in the garden when he happened to glance through a knothole in Mr. Curry's fence. As he did so, he nearly fell over backwards with surprise at the sight which met his gaze. He'd never seen anything quite like it before. It seemed to be a cross between a very large hair net, which had been hung out to dry, and some extra-large knitting, which had gone wrong. It was all very strange, and he was about to go indoors and tell Mrs. Bird all about it when he had his second shock of the morning. "Bear, what are you doing, Bear? Are you spying on me?" "Oh, no, Mr. Curry," gasped Paddington. "I wouldn't do that. I was only trying to see what was going on." Haven't you ever come across a hammock before, Bear? Sailors used to sleep in them at one time. Nowadays, people have them in their gardens. I don't think I've ever seen a bed with holes in before, Mr. Curry. Is it safe?" "Safe? Why, of course it's safe." "Oh, I didn't mean it wasn't a good one, Mr. Curry. It looked rather old. I mean, have you had it a long time?" "Well, For some reason, Mr. Curry seemed anxious to change the subject. "How much do you weigh, Bear?" Paddington considered the matter for a moment. "It depends on how many marmalade sandwiches I've eaten, Mr. Curry. Mrs. Bird says I must weigh quite a lot sometimes." "Look, Bear, I'm going upstairs for a book. I shall only be gone 5 minutes. And while I'm away, you can test my hammock for me. Just to make sure it's safe and comfortable. If you do it properly, I may let you have a go later on, after I've finished with it for the day. Thank you, Mr. Curry. I shall look forward to that. If Paddington had never seen a hammock before, he had even less idea how to get into one. And he soon began to wish Mr. Curry had left him a book of instructions. Oh, dear. Hello, Mr. Curry. Bear! What have you done to my hammock? Come back, Bear! But Paddington had already disappeared. He'd had quite enough of hammocks for one day. His hammock, snorted Mrs. Bird when Paddington told the others about his adventures with Mr. Curry. The cheek of it. I put that hammock out for the dustmen only yesterday. It's been up in the loft for years. It had gone all rotten. Mr. Curry must have taken it before the dustmen arrived. He ought to think himself lucky he didn't go through it. Perhaps, said Paddington hopefully, I could sew some holes together and make you a new one. There's no need. Daddy's bought a new one. Look, it's got a special stand, so it'll be much easier to get into and much safer when you're in. If you like, Paddington, you can be the very first to test it. No, thank you, Mr. Brown, said Paddington politely. After you. In fact, after everyone.